I am very pleased when you subscribe, and our community grows. Nowadays, it is very important to respect the veterans who gave their lives for us. So, do not forget our veterans, and let's expand our community together. Bill was heading to the Graceville Market grocery store, located at the corner of Main Street and Veterans Alley. He did this every week, buying a few cans, a loaf of bread, some milk. But this morning, his attention was drawn to a commotion at the memorial park across the street. A small group of people had gathered there, mostly young men in military uniforms with polished boots and crisp collars. They were laughing, clapping each other on the shoulders, and beside them a dog was barking. A large German shepherd with thick fur and alert eyes. Bill stopped. His heart clenched when he saw the dog. It wasn't just any shepherd. It was Luna, or at least a dog that looked exactly like her. Luna had been his partner in Afghanistan, his shadow in the dust and chaos of war. Together they scoured roads for explosives, slept under the stars, and survived. When Bill was discharged in 2012, he was told Luna would stay in service. He begged to take her with him, but the bureaucracy was unyielding. She belongs to the Corps, they said. And so he went home, leaving a part of himself in that hell. Luna, he called softly, almost unaware he'd spoken aloud. The dog's head snapped toward him. Her ears perked up, her tail twitched, and she took a step toward Bill, pulling at the leash. The man in uniform, a young sergeant with a stern face, held the leash tightly and yanked it back. "Hey, settle down, Rocky," the sergeant said, ignoring Bill. But the dog didn't settle. She barked, her eyes locked on the old man standing a few yards away. Bill stepped closer, his heart pounding. "Luna!" he repeated, louder this time. The dog whined, her paws scraping the ground as if trying to break free. The young soldiers turned to him, their smiles fading. "What do you want, old man?" the sergeant asked, his tone sharp, almost dismissive. He sized Bill up, seeing only an old man in worn clothes, with a cane and trembling hands. "She's my dog," Bill said quietly but firmly. His voice didn't waver, though a storm was rising in his chest. "Her name's Luna. We served together in Afghanistan, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines." The sergeant snorted, exchanging glances with his comrades. "Yeah, right, old-timer. This dog's name is Rocky, and he's ours. Get out of here, don't make trouble." "She responds to Luna," Bill insisted, taking another step. His eyes, faded with time, but still sharp, met the sergeant's. "Look at how she reacts. It's her." One of the soldiers, younger with freckles on his face, laughed. "Old stump, you're probably all mixed up. Go on, buy a beer or whatever you old folks do." Bill stood still. His fingers tightened around his cane, but he didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout or argue. He just looked at Luna, who whimpered and pulled at the leash, her eyes full of longing. Memories flashed through his mind. Luna lying beside him in the tent, sniffing out an IED that saved their patrol, licking his hand after a long day. She wasn't just a dog. She was his family. "I don't want trouble," he said finally, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I just want you to know who she is." The sergeant rolled his eyes. "Listen, Grandpa, beat it before I get mad. We've got an event here and you're not invited." Bill nodded slowly as if absorbing the blow. He glanced at Luna one last time, and she barked as he turned away. Her bark followed him as he walked off, his steps heavier than before. The people around the park, a few locals who'd stopped to watch the soldiers, paid him no mind. To them, he was just an old man, one of many wandering Graceville's streets, invisible as a shadow. But someone was watching. Across the street, near the entrance to the memorial park, stood retired Major General James Thornton. He was in his 70s, but his posture remained straight, his gaze as sharp as a young officer's. He'd come to Graceville for the annual Veterans event, where he was to give a short speech. Thornton didn't care for loud occasions, but he felt it his duty to remind younger generations of the cost of freedom. He stood off to the side in civilian clothes, a simple jacket and a cap with the Marine Corps emblem, when he witnessed the scene unfolding between Bill and the soldiers. Thornton didn't hear everything, but he saw enough. He saw the dog straining toward the old man, how Bill stood with dignity despite the insults, how his shoulders slumped as he walked away. The general frowned, his fingers tightening on the brim of his cap. He knew that look, the look of a man carrying a burden most would never understand. "Lieutenant," Thornton called, approaching the group of soldiers. His voice was calm, but carried an authority that made people stand taller. A young officer nearby stepped forward and saluted. "Yes, sir?" "Who is that man your men were just talking to?" Thornton asked, nodding toward Bill, who was disappearing around the corner. The lieutenant shrugged. "Some old guy, sir. Said our dog was his. Probably got it mixed up. He looked, a bit out of it." Thornton narrowed his eyes. "Did you verify his claim?" "No, sir," the lieutenant admitted, shifting uncomfortably. "He didn't have any ID on him, and my guy said the dog belongs to our unit." The general was silent for a moment, his gaze heavy. "Find him," he said finally. "Bring him to me, and bring the dog." The lieutenant nodded, though he looked surprised. "Yes, sir." Bill sat on a bench near the store, his gaze fixed on the sidewalk. In his hands, he held his wallet, his fingers slowly tracing a faded veteran's ID. It bore his name, William J. Kennedy, rank, Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, and dates of service. But no one had asked to see it. No one had asked. He thought of Luna, her bark, her warmth, her loyalty. He'd believed she was long dead or reassigned to another unit, her life ending without him. But now he knew she was alive, and she remembered him. "Sergeant Kennedy," a voice broke through his thoughts. Bill looked up to see the lieutenant standing before him, holding Luna's leash. The dog whimpered, her tail wagging like a pendulum. Bill stood slowly, his eyes never leaving Luna. "Yes," he said simply. "Major General Thornton wants to speak with you," the lieutenant said, his tone softer this time. "And he asked for the dog." Bill nodded, asking no questions. He followed the lieutenant, his steps slow but steady. Luna walked beside him, her muzzle brushing his hand now and then, as if reassuring herself he was real. When they returned to the park, Thornton was waiting. His eyes met Bill's, and in them was something the old veteran hadn't seen in years: respect. "Sergeant," Thornton said, extending his hand, "tell me your story." Bill hesitated, his hand slowly grasping the general's. He wasn't used to being heard. But Thornton's unwavering gaze gave him strength, and Bill began to speak. His voice was quiet but clear, like a man who'd long carried his memories within. He spoke of Afghanistan, of dust that crunched between teeth, of nights when stars were the only light, of Luna walking ahead, her nose ever alert, her tail the only sign of joy in that hell. He told of how she saved their patrol, how she once leaped at him as a bullet whizzed overhead, and how he lost her when he came home. The soldiers nearby stood silent. The sergeant who'd dismissed Bill lowered his eyes. Luna lay at Bill's feet, her head resting on his boot. Thornton listened without interrupting. When Bill finished, the general turned to the soldiers. His voice was cold as steel. "You told this man to beat it. You called him an old stump. This man is a sergeant in the Marine Corps, who served when you weren't even born, and you couldn't even be bothered to listen." The sergeant opened his mouth, but Thornton raised a hand, silencing him. 100 push-ups, he said. "All of you. Now." The soldiers exchanged glances, but didn't dare argue. They dropped to the ground, their palms pressing into the grass. Thornton turned back to Bill and handed him Luna's leash. "She's yours," he said softly. "As she should be." Bill took the leash, his fingers trembling. Luna stood, her tail wagging, and licked his hand. Tears welled in his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. "Thank you, sir," he said, his voice barely audible. Thornton nodded. "No, Sergeant. Thank you." The crowd in the park had grown larger. Passers-by stopped, drawn to the scene. A local woman named Mary, who knew Bill as that quiet old man in the flannel shirt, pulled out her phone and began recording. She didn't know the full story, but she sensed something momentous was happening. Thornton raised a hand, commanding attention. "Today, we gathered to honor veterans," he began, his voice ringing out over the park. "But I want to tell you about one of them, about Sergeant William Kennedy, who stood shoulder to shoulder with his partner Luna in Afghanistan. They risked their lives so we could live in peace. And today, we return to him what he never should have lost." He turned to Bill and saluted. It was a slow, deliberate gesture, full of respect. One by one, the soldiers, finished with their push-ups, stood and echoed the salute. The crowd applauded tentatively at first, then louder. Bill stood holding Luna's leash. His face remained calm, but a spark flickered in his eyes, one that had long been extinguished. He said nothing, only nodded slightly, accepting the honor. Bill stood before the crowd, his figure small against the tall soldiers, but a quiet fire burned in his eyes. General Thornton, whose presence dominated the park, turned to him. His face, hardened by years of service, softened as he placed a hand on Bill's shoulder. "Sergeant Kennedy," Thornton said, his voice clear yet warm, like the sound of a distant drum. "You've earned the right to be heard. Tell us your story. Not the one I heard, the one you carry inside." The crowd fell silent. The people behind, locals, a few children holding their parents' hands, and the soldiers who'd just done push-ups on the grass, all watched Bill. Mary, the older woman recording the scene, lowered her hand, her eyes glistening with curiosity. The young sergeant who'd dismissed Bill stood with his head bowed, his cheeks burning with shame. Bill hesitated. He wasn't a speaker. His life was made of orders, quiet desert nights, and brief talks with Luna, who never needed words. But Thornton's respectful gaze and the warm weight of Luna at his feet gave him strength. He took a deep breath, his fingers tightening on the leash, and began to speak. "I'm not used to talking about myself," Bill started, his voice low, slightly hoarse, but clear as a bell in the silence. "I never thought my stories mattered. They were for me, and for her." He looked down at Luna, who raised her head, her amber eyes meeting his. "But if you want to know, I'll tell you. Not for me. For those who didn't come back." His words hung in the air, and the crowd stilled. Some locals exchanged glances, sensing this moment transcended an ordinary day in Graceville. "I was with the 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, Afghanistan, 2009 to 2012. Luna and I were a team. She wasn't just a dog. She was my eyes, my ears, my friend. We searched for explosives, IEDs hidden in dust, in trash, in anything that could conceal death. Luna found them every time. She saved us more times than I can count." He paused, his fingers stroking the leash, as if seeking support. "But there was one night, a night I'll never forget. We were in Helmand Province, on patrol, dark as pitch, just stars and our flashlights. Luna was out front, like always, and suddenly she stopped, lay down, her nose pressed to the sand. I knew what that meant, an explosive. We all froze. But one of our guys, a young kid, Private Travis, he didn't make it." Bill lowered his head, his voice trembling, but he pressed on. Travis was from Iowa, 19 years old. Loved telling stories about his sister, how they'd fish at a lake near their house. He was one of those who always laughed, even when we were all beat. That night, he took one step too far. The blast. I still hear it. Luna whimpered, rushed to him, but it was too late. I held him until he stopped breathing. His blood was on my hands, on her fur. Silence fell over the crowd. Mary pressed a hand to her mouth, her phone slowly lowering. The young sergeant who'd called Bill an old stump clenched his fists, his eyes glistening. A child beside her mother whispered, "Mom, why's he crying?" But the mother only shook her head, her own eyes wet. Bill pulled his wallet from his pocket. His rough, aged fingers carefully drew out a yellowed letter. Folded so often the paper was thin as cloth. He unfolded it, holding it like a sacred relic. "This is a letter from Travis's mother," he said. "She wrote to me after I got home. I didn't know what to say when I heard she wanted to talk. I thought she'd blame me. I blamed myself. But she wrote..." His voice broke, and he cleared his throat before continuing. "She wrote, 'William, thank you for being with my boy in his final moments. Thank you for not leaving him alone. I know you and Luna did all you could. You gave me comfort knowing he wasn't alone.'" Bill looked up, his gaze roaming the faces in the crowd. "I'm no hero. I just did my job. But Luna, she was more than me. She never hesitated. She was never afraid. And when I came home, they told me I couldn't take her, that she belonged to the Corps. I thought I'd lost her forever. I thought I'd lost the last piece of what kept me whole." He rested his hand on Luna's head and she leaned into him, her tail lightly thumping the ground. "Today, I saw her, and she recognized me. After all these years, she remembered. And I thought, maybe I still mean something. Maybe what we didn't vanish in the dust." His words faded, and for a moment, the park was filled only with the rustle of the flag and the distant bark of another dog. Then, Mary, standing near the crowd's edge, began to clap, slowly, with trembling hands. Others joined her. The soldiers who'd done push-ups stood tall and saluted, this time unprompted. Some locals wiped tears, and the young mother hugged her child, whispering something about bravery. Thornton stepped forward. His eyes shone, but he held himself steady. "Sergeant Kennedy," he said, "you've reminded us why we're here. Not for parades or speeches, but for those who gave everything, and those who carry it quietly, every day. We owe you. And Luna," he turned to the crowd. "Today, we honor all veterans. But let me say this. We must see them not just on days like this. They're among us, in stores, on benches, in the quiet corners of our towns. They don't ask for recognition, but we must give it." He gestured for Bill to step forward. "Sergeant, will you allow us to honor you and Luna properly?" Bill nodded, his throat tight. He didn't trust his voice, but his eyes said everything. Thornton pulled a small box from his pocket containing a medal, not an official award, but a symbolic one, crafted by the local community for veterans. He pinned it to Bill's flannel shirt, right over his heart. "This is from Graceville," Thornton said, "for your service, and for your silence." The crowd erupted in applause, loud and heartfelt this time. Children waved, soldiers shouted, "Oorah!" And Mary, still holding her phone, wept openly, her hands shaking. Luna barked as if joining the celebration, and Bill, for the first time in years, allowed himself a faint smile. After the speech, the park didn't disperse. People approached Bill, shaking his hand, thanking him. The young sergeant who'd insulted him came last. His face was pale, his eyes red. "I'm sorry, sir," he said, his voice trembling. "I didn't know. I was wrong." Bill looked at him, his gaze soft but firm. "You're young," he said. "You're learning. Just remember, everyone you meet carries a story. Listen to them." The sergeant nodded, saluted, and stepped back. His shoulders slumped, not from anger, but from the weight of the lesson. Mary, who'd recorded the speech, approached Bill with a letter in hand. Not the one he'd shown, but a new one, handwritten. "This is from all of us," she said. "We want you to know you're not invisible. Not to us. Not anymore." Bill took the letter, his fingers tracing the rough paper. He didn't open it, but nodded, his eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you, Mary," he said softly. "It means a lot." In the days that followed, Graceville changed. Bill's story, recorded by Mary and shared on social media, went viral in the small town. People stopped to talk to him when they saw him walking with Luna. The local store donated food for Luna, and elementary school kids drew her cards. The community raised funds to install a small plaque in the memorial park, inscribed, "In honor of William Kennedy and Luna, faithful defenders of freedom." Bill didn't change. He still went to the store weekly, still wore his flannel shirt and carried the cane he rarely leaned on. But his steps were lighter and a glint appeared in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Luna walked beside him, her tail swaying like a flag of victory. One evening, sitting on the porch of his small house, Bill unfolded Mary's letter. It held words from dozens of people, neighbors, veterans, children. Each wrote something unique. A thank you, a memory, a promise to remember. The final line was Mary's. "You reminded us that heroes live among us. Thank you for teaching us to see." Bill folded the letter and tucked it into his wallet, beside Travis's mother's letter. He patted Luna, who lay at his feet, and looked at the stars. They were the same as in Helmand, but now they felt closer. This story isn't just about Bill or Luna. It's about those who walk among us, carrying quiet burdens we rarely notice. It's about the power of small acts of kindness, a nod, an apology, an outstretched hand. It calls us to pause, to look, to listen. In every town, on every street, there are heroes waiting to be seen. Notice them, talk to them, let them know their stories matter. Subscribe to Hoffman's Stories for more tales of quiet heroism and the transformative power of kindness.